I did a video and talked about it, the podcast on Saturday night after all the games. And like I said, I grew up, anyone my age, if you grew up loving football in the 90s, Florida State was a behemoth. They were a national program. I've been following the program. I literally have a good buddy who is Norvell's right-hand guy, helps pick the players, lead recruiter, GM, whatever his official title is. I'm rooting for the program. But the moment their quarterback went down, you're no longer that program. So this notion of our resume, well, the wins you got were not with this team, not with your quarterbacks. If Jordan Travis was still around, they have to be in. I would not argue. And if they were to get screwed and had gotten left out when they're starting quarterback, I would totally understand the argument. But when you're rolling out a third-string quarterback or a backup quarterback who also sucks and is old, I feel no sympathy. Now, here's what I've never had an issue with in sports. When people's moms, when people's dads, when people's significant others, when their brothers get very emotional and defend their guy and say shit about their family's team. I get it. They're emotionally tied and close to the situation. There's a difference between them and me and you just as a fan, right? They are much closer to it given that they're sleeping with them. It's their son. Their investment in it is just at a completely different level given their connection. So I always give them some leeway when it's ever like, can you believe what Aisha Curry said in Cleveland? Well, yeah, it's her fucking husband. What do you think? I never put any stock into any of that. I think that's such catnip for the fucking booger eaters on social media. Totally understandable. And these fans, like if you're a Florida State fan, if you're a Florida State player, if you're their coach, be gutted probably doesn't even do a good enough job of describing how you'd feel. That picture today when it got announced Alabama and you could see the head coach sitting there in like sweats and behind him Jordan Travis, whose leg is still wrapped up like up high, and the soul out of Mike Norvell's body, you could feel it. Like, have you ever seen the movie Ghost with Swayze and Demi Moore, like the souls leave? That's how you could see a soul leave. Jordan Travis looked like he saw a ghost. I understand in that room, all the guys like were getting up. They were rattled. Totally get it. But I'm sorry, you're a 14-point underdog against Georgia. Like, you know what the committee did? They put Georgia at 6 and Florida State at 5 because of optics. It had like a government feel to it. Like this would look good. They didn't believe that Florida State was better than Georgia. They're literally a 2-touchdown underdog to them in the Orange Bowl. They believed that Georgia was better, but it wasn't worth putting Georgia at 5 and then because it would even got louder. Because if Georgia had beat Alabama, guess what? Florida State still wasn't going to go. Texas is 3rd. Texas has a loss. They believe that Texas, as a one-loss team, was better than Florida State. Why? Because they are. When you don't have a quarterback, one thing I've learned as I've gotten older is the word deserved. And I heard a great quote one time. You don't deserve anything. You get what you negotiate, right? So like this notion of deserving, if you spend all your time thinking you deserve things, you're going to get lapped. Now, I understand like you deserve, if you're a Power 5 team, your team's not healthy though. You lost the most important guy on your team, the quarterback, the most important guy in the sport. Here's the other reality. The reason the SEC and the Big Ten keep expanding and merging, because they want to wipe you all out. You realize when you bring a Target, when you bring a Walmart, when you bring a Costco into an area, it wipes out the little guy. That's what the Big Ten and the SEC are doing. And Florida State knows this. It's why they've tried to get to the SEC. The problem is they're involved in this television deal, which is fucking terrible, and it's signed for the next like 10 years with ESPN. So they're kind of stuck. They're no dummies. If they had done what they did in the SEC, they're in. Of course they would be. Their second best win is against an 8-4 Clemson team. I got news for you. If you had rolled your backup quarterback or the third stringer against Clemson at Clemson this season, you would have lost. So that win to me means nothing. Like I said, completely understand the emotional outpouring and anger and just resentment toward the whole thing, threatening legal action, all the bullshit. I get it. That's what happens during these situations. It was all justified. And we have to come first. All of this exists not for the teams and the players and the coaches. It all exists, all this money now, especially the NIL. I had a scout. He's not even a scout. He's like an assistant GM tell me that one thing he's heard going into these schools is like Some of these coaches are less emotionally invested in the player. They treat it more like the NFL. It's like, well, you're making fucking 400 grand. Either make a player, get out of here. Where back in the day, even if I brown bag you at 50K, I get to know you. I live with the ups and the downs. But now it's become much more transactional. That's what this sport is. There's a ton of money on the line. It's all transactional. And Alabama's a 2-point underdog. You would have been an 18-point underdog. It's just basic math. And Herb Street said this, like, no one wants to watch these bad games. It's a fact. No one wants to watch these bad games. We saw the NFC Championship between the Eagles and the 49ers when they didn't have a quarterback. How was that? I don't know. The worst playoff game I've ever seen, just as a viewer and lover of the sport, right? So that's what you guys would have been. You didn't deserve it. Here's the other thing. It's not fair. Life's not fair. It's a bitch. It sucks. You know, the greatest lesson that will ever happen to all those Florida State guys is to learn in that moment, God, you can get screwed at the moment's notice. Welcome to America. What a great life lesson, especially for all those guys going into business. They're already ahead of the curve because most of the people they're going to competing against early on in their professional career, if they don't make it to the NFL, have never experienced something like that. The greatest life lesson is when you get screwed, when you fail, things out of your control. You guys did everything in your control. It just wasn't good enough because it's not good enough because you're not good enough. Like that's an objective fact. Like the betting angle just proves like you would have been you're a multiple touchdown right now against Georgia, who I got news for you, doesn't care at all about this Orange Bowl at all. Half their team's probably going to opt out. Their Super Bowl was Alabama and they lost. So if you think you guys are devastated, that team doesn't give a shit about this game. So this notion that they got screwed, I guess personally, maybe a little bit from a football standpoint, they're not better than Alabama. Hell, they're not better than Georgia. They're not better than Oregon right now. The right thing happened. So props for the committee for not worrying about, quote unquote, the blowback or what was going to piss people off on social media. If more companies started operating this way, maybe society would get back on track instead of being worried about, like, what's the blowback going to be like on X? Here's a news flash. Who gives a fuck? Make the right decision.